It's N+7, and the question is, who created self-exiled as a commentary on self-evident? Who did it? How did that happen?
That is a loaded question.
I know, that's why I asked it.
Like, who did it?
How did it? Who's responsible for that?
Keep on putting me on the spot, Al.
I know. Who did that? Did Rosemary Waldrop do it?
Like, who created it, or how is it?
I mean, even through chapter 9.1, what Lynn Haginian did was meant. When she did these, right? She meant that. There's a certain amount of intention, even though there's a certain scrambling in that great book-length poem, My Life. She would say, yeah, I guess I chose that word. But Jackson McClough, if you went up to him and said, that's a really great poem, he'd say, why are you asking me? I didn't do it. Who created the difference between self-evident and self-exiled?
The dictionary.
Regina behind you said the dictionary. You don't have to give her the mic, I'll repeat it. The dictionary. Does the dictionary have volition? Susan Howe.
No, but I mean, like, I guess in a way.
Questions of grammar.
I mean, I guess in a way, didn't Rosemary create it because she was the one who came up with the idea and she was the one who thought of it? So, like, it is her poetry. It was just using other words.
I want to ask Emily and then Max. Can you help us understand the relationship between self-evident and self-exiled such that it helps us understand why Rosemary Waldrop would do a seemingly random, quasi-non-intentional process? The line in the Declaration is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. When you do N+7, it's, we holler these trysts to be self-exiled, that all manatees are credited equidistant. Emily, how do you explain the relationship between self-evident and self-exiled?
Yeah, well, the thing is, they're clearly not self-evident, that people are not really created equal or treated equally.
Is that Emily speaking just because you're theoretically sophisticated and the founding fathers were not? No, I'm serious. Is that something we know?
Sure. No, we don't know if kind of we're talking about an inclusive kind of totalizing we. Clearly there are many people who do believe that everyone enjoys the same freedoms and the same equality that we were promised. But when you read the lines that your equality is self-evident, if it's not evident to you, then it exiles you from the logic of that statement. It exiles you from your country's understanding of itself.
So how did Max McKenna, how did Rosemary Waldrop happen upon such a profound critique of Jefferson's claim of self-evidently true equality?
Well, supposedly she happened upon it through the N+7 game in the dictionary, though has anybody actually ever tried to do Waldrop's experiment again to see exactly how far?
Yes, it's been done. Manatees don't work.
Yeah, manatees doesn't work. I know that's the first one that comes to mind. And self-exiled is just too perfect to work.
Oh, so you're thinking that she looked and found something she wanted, cheated on the N+7? Rosemary is watching this webcast. You're going to get a cease and desist letter from her.
I don't know why I would get a cease and desist
I'm
letter.
kidding, Max. Relax. I'm kidding.
I think that everybody who undertakes the N+7 game, unless they are really like very pious practitioners of an N+7,
Jackson McClough is pious.
Yes, there are definitely, we've encountered some, I think in the previous week, those poets are a lot more committed to it. And then the thing with the, I think the interesting synthesis that we get here in this final week is that we get, I think, the previous 2 weeks, language, poetry, and unoriginality kind of converging in this place here. So even though or rather aleatory poetry and language poetry converging here in what we call unoriginality, which is like, it's maybe not entirely as uncreative and unoriginal as it claims to be. And I think there's actually like a lot of room for these poets to reassert their agency and authority here. So I think in this case, it's almost too perfect a criticism of of this Jeffersonian idea, right? To have been so entirely random, although the randomness is itself a criticism, right?
Okay. Orly, do you still have the mic? Okay, back to Orly then. So even given what Max said, which is that Rosemarie was hoping to find an ironic juxtaposition, she didn't do the 9.1 language poetry approach, which is just create the juxtaposition and make us work through the parataxis. Right? She didn't do the Dickinsonian thing, though she could have, and she is kind of a Dickinsonian poet otherwise, of creating just a brilliant set of condensed ironies. What did she do? How did she make that irony? If even including Max's hoped for n+7 result, how do you explain this? Let's say to a 12-year-old kid, you're kind of minding, while her parents are out, and she says, "Tell me about this n+7 stuff. How does it result?" How do you speak to a 10-year-old about this?
Just about n+7?
Yeah, or how this resulted. How did this come about?
I'm not sure. That's a loaded question, bud.
Okay. Adelaide, how did it happen? What do you say? How do you describe the process?
n+7?
Well, we know what the process is, but the larger question is, what is authorship and authority and authorial intention when this is the result?
It's something that I've struggled with this week, just because I think one of the best things about poetry is the fact that it's all about intention. And so how do you reconcile the fact that you're computerizing essentially what would otherwise be, a planned, thought out, specific intention. And I think that that's sort of the point, in the sense that it's and we talked about this with Ashbery, it's planned randomness. You're choosing, and there we go, choice, to do something that is outside of your realm of choice. And that's sort of life. And in that way, it mimics life. And that's sort of how I've tried to find meaning this week, just because I definitely, prefer the more, I'm going to say organic in the sense of non-computerized form of intention. But I do think that this is maybe a little more real in the sense that it's chosen randomness, and it is surrendering to randomness.
So, Lily and Dave Poplar, here's a question, following from what Adelaide just said. So when in a vocabulary for Peter Innisfree Moore, the word real, R-E-A-L, comes out as a way of perhaps describing the dead man, Peter Moore. If it were written with intention, somebody said, "Oh, Peter Moore, he was so real." The photographer, Peter, he was so real, let's say in an elegiac setting. What's the difference between that sense of real, intended, and the fact that the combination of his names, Peter Innisfree Moore, is there an L in there? There isn't. So real is not one of the words.
Freer was the
freer, right. Freer, thank you. So now that he's passed away, he is freer, says a eulogist who intends in the way Adelaide means. What's the difference between intending freer in that setting or discovering it accidentally in the language, the letters of his name?
Yeah, so I think the idea and like what would motivate someone to seek one of those processes to write to begin with is that if you are bogged down by too much convention or expectation or linearity or conventional narrative, your message, even though it comes from a well-intentioned place, will get lost because it fades into the background of what we expect at such a place and doesn't seem as genuine. It doesn't seem genuine even if it comes from a genuine place, whereas to do something that totally breaks apart the whole process and then to still find that sentiment, it somehow means more because you haven't gone through the same old regular processes. It's kind of like this happens to me all the time where you have a very strange experience or an experience that it just is too perfect, and you say to your friend that's like a classic movie ending, or if this was fiction, we would say it's like too easy or too perfect or whatever.
Too perfect,
but
too easy.
Because it happened in your life, which is random and weird. You didn't write it down. It just happened. Then it kind of means something.
That's so good. We're going to turn to Dave. But Adelaide, did you hear that response? Because what you described as automated is the computer stuff. But we sitting here just taking this position would say that that's the automated stuff, the old intentional, the old I'm writing an elegy, I'm writing a sonnet. That's automatic. What's not automatic is discovering. Let's assume that it was the seventh word down, discovering self-exiled, or having a friend of Peter Moore perform from a score, a dance, and saying freer. That's less automatic, even though it's been automated by the dissociation of subjectivity as much as possible. Dave Poplar, you want to add something to this? Hi, Dave.
Hi, Al. How's it going? Yeah, I agree with everything Lily said. I don't really have much to add other than it's interesting to say freer in that hackneyed way. It's like an intention for a cliche. You're intending a cliche. So what are you really intending? And it just the way that the poem really uses freer to make freer. I don't know. It really highlights the way intending a cliche, intending the word freer has lost its meaning.